So I still get these requests asking, hey, is this organization or this course or this bootcamp is good enough? Should I invest money in it? And my short answer, and I already captured that in a couple of videos on UX bootcamps and courses, is that it really depends. I mean, ultimately, the course itself is not going to make you a UXer. That's the bottom line. But of course, you can learn from it. Of course, you can cover the gaps. Of course, it can hasten your progression in UX. However, having said that, if you are sure that you want to commit to a bootcamp or a course, I have 9 specific factors, 9 specific principles, which I recommend every junior to always consider before they opt in for a course or a bootcamp. And to best illustrate this, I'm going to use a manuscript, an excerpt from my upcoming book called Get Into UX Design. You can still pre-order it. Just in 2 days, we got to a bestseller list, even if a book hasn't been released yet. And of course, you can tell immediately that the competition is on our heels, so let's not allow them to take us over. Anyhow, let's jump back to the topic. Now, the first one is an obvious one. Is it a true UX course or bootcamp? Or is it UI-focused course? Sort of highlights some user research, you kind of do it end-to-end, but don't really go into depth or kind of try to cover it in the real-life scenarios. I always recommend for people to check curriculum, to check with people who have done it, to check with people who are more senior than them. You shouldn't email me asking about every single bootcamp, that's why I'm making this video, but you surely know some people around you who could give you advice. For example, the Design Squad Discord community. You can join it right now. There's a link in the bio, just scroll down. You can ask any other person who's maybe more experienced than you, maybe someone who's a peer who's taking a course. They can tell you if that course actually is reasonable and if it was good enough for them to understand about UX, right? Like to get started. Now, the next one is an obvious one, but my pet peeve with all the intensive courses and let's say 12-week bootcamps is that they're kind of crammed up to give you like the gist, like a fundamental 101. And so you kind of race through that material, race through those exercises, but you don't really live it. You don't really embody the actual tactics and the strategy of the UX. It might take you weeks or months, but actual learning UX takes years. Every curriculum I would look at right now, there will be several weeks of theory and then just on the end, some practice or some practice peppered throughout, but it's not really enough. It doesn't represent the actual project you would face in a real workplace, which could take you months or sometimes years to work on. So there's a lot of discrepancies here. The time investment is as important as the money investment. The more time you're going to spend on something, learning something, the more time you're going to have a chance to practice it, to actually apply it, to see what works, what doesn't work. Because there's not only like a cookie cutter approach to things. That's exactly why, let's say, a bootcamp or a course is not going to make you a UX designer, because it's very one-sided, it's very predictable, it's very synthetic, and it's very tied to a specific use case at hand. In real world, you're going to face 20 different challenges which that could have not been covered in a course or bootcamp. And now the next one is a simple one, but it's a social aspect. In that book you're going to read, I hope, you might pre-order or order once it's released, you're going to understand that the social side to learning is as important as that individual side or the theoretical side. The peer reviews is part of our UX, it's part of our research methods, it's part of our, let's say, designing. You always learn from other people and you do so much faster because you can actually learn from others. And so if a course or bootcamp doesn't have immediate community, or it doesn't have a follow-on community, or it doesn't have like very active discussions going on or forum, it's very questionable because it would become very one-sided. You would just take that information, but you can't really bounce ideas or call out if something doesn't really make sense. It's a simple thing. Now, the next one is a follow-on from a previous point, but does it provide you with networking opportunities? Myself, if I would go back in time and I would look for a course or a bootcamp, I would always care first if there's people who actually done the bootcamp and actually succeeded to getting a job. Does it provide you with an ability to connect to, let's say, with the peers, with the more senior people, with people who actually done it? And with the next one, I think is the most important bit here in terms of learning and its application. It doesn't matter how much theory you're going to grasp or how many things you're gonna watch, or boot camps you're gonna visit, or courses you're gonna do, or YouTube videos you're gonna scan through. It doesn't really matter if you cannot apply it, because a lot of the knowledge you're gonna gather from courses and books are gonna be forgotten. That's just how we are wired. We're not superhumans to retain every single element of what you learn, but what's for sure and how you can hack it is the repetitions, is the consistency, is the actual application and embodiment of that. That's why, for example, for myself, if I'm learning something or I'm listening to new information, I have to write it down, because then I register. I'm never gonna look at that note again, but the actual embodiment of the note matters a lot, because that's a practice where I'm priming my body to actually grasp that information as an important type of bits I need to recall. And the recall is really important here, because if you don't again practice the things you learn, you're gonna lose it. And so look for opportunities which are highly action-based, which are action-biased, which have, of course, enough of information which is being downloaded from whoever is teaching it, but there's also a big aspect of the application itself. And the next thing is a segue of that, but it's really because of that practicality and the need of that practice, does it lead to a case study? Does it lead to a project? Ultimately, you have to consider that it's gonna take you time, and it should take you time to learn things and practice things. Is there a result of that? Is there some sort of fruits of labor? Are you gonna come up with a project and something to showcase as the evidence to the hiring managers and to the market? Hey, look at me, I'm ready for that job. If not, then what's almost a point here, because you could learn from books and online courses, self-paced learning, and apply it immediately, and probably be better off than taking a bootcamp or a course which doesn't allow you to put it into practice, document everything, collect the evidence, come up with a strong enough for the market case studies, which would make you considerable candidate. It's almost like you're investing right in your outcomes of becoming a UX designer. That's why you are there to begin with. And now the next one is a big pet peeve. But I noticed that a lot of courses and boot camps kind of forces you to almost learn with other people, right? It could be in person, it could be online, and we form these groups and almost pretend to be stakeholders. And I heard from quite a few junior designers that they would form the teams of multiple designers doing the same thing or assuming different roles, but there would be no other stakeholders. There wouldn't be developers, there wouldn't be product managers, there wouldn't be anyone else. They would almost pretend that someone else is doing that. And that's a big blind spot, because if you don't collaborate with actual stakeholders whose agenda is never going to match with your UX agenda, or at least rarely going to match, which you're going to need to convince the right ways to do so, you're going to struggle in the end. And it might not be apparent immediately, but in the long run, once you join a market, you're soon going to realize that reality looks very different. There's going to be 10 different opinions around you, and yours might match that. But if you're doing UX, you're doing the research, you're doing new user-centric insights, and you're bringing them to a table, they're going to be brand new to the business, let's say. Convincing them is going to take you a lot of effort. And of course, I understand if it's a bootcamp or a course, there's a lot of to ask to do that, but that's a blind spot you need to consider and then prepare once you apply for the job to almost be honest that, hey, this is what you still need to cover, and maybe look in, let's say, internships or programs or junior positions, that that's something you're going to need to pick up quickly and learn about. Another aspect to that is access to users. I talked to quite a few juniors who were asked just to interview their parents or other designers, or interview people from outside, or interview that staged person who came in. And that to me is like, it's a good showcase of what UX should be about, but it's not real, because in real life scenarios, you're going to encounter insights which you're not going to know what to do about. It's not going to be staged, it's not going to be synthetic, it's not going to be digested for you to just take on and say, oh, I'm doing UX. If curriculum doesn't clearly state that you're gonna have to figure out how to engage with users, or there's not appropriate amount of users, or the users are fake, or the users are gonna be your peers who are learning, I would kind of just walk away basically. Because it's almost like what I'm as a hiring manager gonna be looking for. If you're gonna show me the case study from Bootcamp and it clearly shows that you didn't really do user research or engage with the users at an appropriate amount to capture enough insights and evidence, then it's it's just tough luck. And then the next one is less about learning, but more about staying accountable and actually learning and, working your ass off, for a lack of a better term. If you're watching this, I would presume you finished high school, maybe got a degree somewhere, you learned somewhere, you know how it works. It doesn't matter if you shown up, it doesn't matter if you sat through a lecture, it doesn't matter if you did the minimal practice run. What's gonna matter is what you do after that. It's what you do in the after hours. How do you apply it? How do you actually put in practice? How you capture that evidence? How far are you actually gonna go, and how bad do you want it? And it could be that the teachers or, the coach or maybe a supervisor, mentor, peer keeps you accountable. And of course, the better course or bootcamp you're gonna pick, which has that already built in or has some sort of accountability mechanisms or check-ins, is definitely gonna motivate you to show up and discipline you to actually perform. And now the next one is a perfect one to wrap this up. And it's about actual end of a course or a bootcamp. Is there some sort of mechanism for you to get a diploma, to be evaluated, to get feedback? Is there a mechanism, again, for you to keep accountable to produce the highest level quality type of outputs? I want you to seek to be evaluated and your efforts to be scrutinized and criticized constructively at that. But I want you to seek almost courses and bootcamps which you could fail. There's gonna be super rare, but it's almost, to me, that has to be a requirement. If you cannot fail a course or a bootcamp, then it's probably just teaching you of the 101 fundamental understanding of UX, but not really how to do UX. And that's, again, another recipe for disaster and yet another factor why so many people struggle to get into UX, because they think they're ready and worthy for a market and qualified, but in reality they are not, because they learned a lot, there was no criteria for them to meet. And maybe that teacher or coach or whoever ran that bootcamp, who you paid those top bucks, told you that you are a UX designer, but that's just not gonna fly. The market is gonna even out, and the market always corrects it. And that's why you have so many frustrated people who spend that money, learn that stuff, but cannot get in. And of course, there's a ton of factors, and there's a ton more of things to consider, but these are the top ones. Did you find it interesting? Did you find it useful? Make sure to leave a comment down below. Share with a friend maybe who's trying to get into UX. Make sure to pre-order the book as well if you want more insights like that, because the book is packed. There's hundreds of pages, tons of frameworks, a lot of different bits and bobs. Make sure to pick that up. And on that note, I'll see you next time.